People say that when you become a doctor, your whole world changes, but nothing in my medical training has prepared me to become a mother at 34. Mine did too, but not for the reasons I expected. Because the moment my husband Ethan looked at our newborn son for the first time, he didn't cry or smile or even reach for him. He just stared and said, "We need a DNA test." Immediately, the room fell dead silent. Then with the most casual smirk he added, "He's too good looking to be mine." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat there in my hospital bed holding our newborn Noah just hours after labor, my medical mind suddenly overwhelmed by raw emotion. My arms tightened instinctively around him. His skin was soft and slightly pink, his tiny fingers curled into a fist near his cheek, textbook perfect newborn reflexes that I'd explained to countless patients. He made a little cooing noise, unaware of the silence that followed his dad's words. At first I laughed, because what else do you do when the man you've been married to for 3 years, the security expert you met at that medical data conference, says something so absurd? But no one else really joined in. Fiona, my midwife colleague of 10 years, chuckled awkwardly, more out of discomfort than amusement. My sister Vanessa, who'd been scrolling through her phone near the window, suddenly stiffened with the alertness I recognized from her courtroom demeanor. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "what are you even talking about?" He didn't laugh. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Noah like he was analyzing encrypted data. His eyes narrowed slightly, and that stupid smirk never left his face. "I'm just saying," Ethan shrugged, "baby's eyes, hair, and little chin dimple. I mean, come on, there's no way he got all the good genes." I felt my cheeks flush, not from the compliment but from the implication. My chest tightened like a constricted blood vessel, the pressure building with each heartbeat. I tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "So what, you're serious? You actually want a test?" My medical brain was already calculating hereditary traits and genetic probabilities. Ethan walked closer to the bed and leaned down to look at Noah. "Just to validate the data," he said, like we were talking about securing a network, not questioning the paternity of our newborn son. I felt a slow burn crawl up my neck. My hands trembled as I shifted Noah in my arms, cradling him closer to my chest. His warmth was the only thing grounding me in that moment. From the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa rise from her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line, the same expression she wore when preparing to cross-examine a hostile witness. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. She never trusted Ethan, not fully, and maybe in that moment, I didn't either. I looked at my husband, the IT security consultant who held my hand through every appointment, who painted the nursery pale green and told me we'd name our son after his grandfather. And I saw someone else, someone cold, detached, suspicious. "Standard verification protocol," he said again with a shrug, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal, because suddenly everything felt different, the room, the joy, even Noah's soft breathing. It was all undercut by this shadow he had cast. Why did his words hurt so much? Wasn't I enough? Didn't he trust me? I didn't have the answers yet, but my diagnostic mind was already cataloging the symptoms of something wrong. I knew one thing, the moment should have been beautiful, and instead it was the beginning of something I never saw coming. After Ethan made that comment, everything shifted, not just in the room but inside me. You'd think after giving birth your only thoughts would be about the baby, assessing APGAR scores, monitoring vital signs, tracking feeding patterns. But those clinical observations were overwhelmed by emotional ones. But instead, I couldn't stop thinking about him. That is what my husband, Ethan, said to me. We were discharged 2 days later. My sister Vanessa insisted on staying with us for a while to help, but I knew she didn't trust Ethan alone with me. I told her she was being dramatic, invoking attorney-client privilege where none existed. She didn't argue, she just gave me that look, tight-lipped, eyes sharp with legal scrutiny beneath the concern. Ethan, on the other hand, acted like everything was normal. He didn't bring up the DNA test again, not once. He changed diapers, made jokes about sleep deprivation, even took a few carefully framed photos with Noah, though he never posted them, citing digital security concerns. I tried to let it go, to convince myself it had been a stupid joke said at the worst possible moment. But something inside me had started to ache, a quiet, gnawing kind of ache, the kind you can't diagnose but you feel in your bones. It wasn't just the comment. It was how he looked at Noah sometimes, like he was scanning him for vulnerabilities. I caught him one night standing over the crib, just staring. He didn't notice I was watching. His brow was furrowed, eyes squinting a little, like he was searching for encryption keys hidden in our son's features. When I stepped into the room, he jolted slightly and laughed it off. "Just running facial recognition," he said. I smiled, but something about his tone made my diagnostic instincts flare up. Then little things started happening, things my medical training would have dismissed as coincidence if I wasn't already on edge. A midwife from the hospital, Fiona, my colleague of 10 years, called one afternoon saying they were updating their medical database records. Her voice was professional, but I caught that slight vocal tension I'd heard thousands of times when colleagues tried to hide concerns. I accessed my hospital portal and gave her Noah's medical record number, and she paused for a beat before saying everything was properly documented. I asked her directly if something was flagged in the system. She said no, but her voice had that same cadence we use when omitting concerning details from patients. Later that night, I logged into the hospital's medical records system and reviewed Noah's charts, noticing something that set off my clinical alarms. The electronic medical record number assigned to him at birth, one of the digits was off from mine, just one character in the alphanumeric sequence. A data entry error maybe, but once your analytical mind starts questioning, medical training demands you investigate further. I accessed medical journals and hospital security protocols on patient identification for hours. I fell down an evidence-based rabbit hole I never meant to find. I finally showed Ethan, thinking his IT security background would appreciate the systemic implications. "Are you serious right now?" he said, laughing with startling dismissiveness. "You were the one mad at me for even suggesting something was off, and now you're acting like the baby might not be ours." I opened my mouth to present my evidence, but he kept going. "Olivia, you're experiencing confirmation bias, you just had a baby, your cortisol and oxytocin levels are fluctuating wildly. Don't let paranoia compromise your objectivity." He kissed my forehead and walked away, leaving me standing there with a tablet full of medical records and a mind full of competing hypotheses. Maybe his assessment was correct, but if everything was medically sound, why couldn't I silence my clinical instincts telling me something wasn't? I started examining everything with professional scrutiny: Noah's birth certificate, the electronic records, ultrasound data, biometric markers and photos. I became someone I didn't recognize, a doctor with a newborn in one arm and access to medical databases showing statistical anomalies in the other. I didn't want to believe Ethan was serious about the test, but now, deep down, my scientific mind wasn't so sure he was wrong to question. And that terrified me. It was a few days later when Ethan brought it up again. He didn't do it during a fight or even with a hint of anger. He just said it casually over coffee, like he was discussing encryption protocols. "So I found a private lab that does rapid genomic sequencing," he said, taking a sip from his mug. "HIPAA compliant. ISO certified. Military-grade privacy standards." I blinked at him, my clinical detachment momentarily failing me, the hot coffee burning against my palm. "You're still on that?" He looked up, his eyes were calm but too calm, the practice neutrality of someone compartmentalizing data. "I think it'll just give us both data-driven certainty." "Both?" I didn't answer right away. I stared down at Noah, who was curled up on my chest, his tiny lips twitching in REM sleep that my medical training recognized as perfectly normal development. He was so peaceful, so perfect, every vital sign exactly where it should be. The idea that anyone would question him, even his father, felt like an ethical violation of my doctor's oath and instinct as a mother. But at the same time, I had been investigating discrepancies too, hadn't I? The mismatched medical record number, Fiona's professional hesitation, the way Ethan analyzed Noah in the dark like he was scanning for anomalies in code. "I thought you said you were joking," I whispered, still monitoring Noah's breathing patterns while my heart raced against his steady rhythm. Ethan shrugged. "Risk assessment." "But seriously, Olivia, wouldn't empirical evidence help you too? Your observational behavior shows elevated anxiety responses. Classic confirmation bias symptoms." He wasn't wrong in his clinical assessment, but something in his delivery felt off, not concerned, algorithmic. Like he had already mapped the decision tree and was navigating me toward his predetermined outcome. That night I didn't sleep, my medical training fighting against maternal instinct and professional suspicion. I kept watching Ethan out of the corner of my eye, not because I thought he'd harm Noah, but because I realized I didn't know the security consultant I married at that medical data conference 3 years ago. Or maybe I never did beyond the credentials and cybersecurity presentations that had first impressed me. The next morning, I accessed the hospital records system directly with my physician credentials. I told my colleague in health information management I needed to verify Noah's birth records for personal documentation purposes. The database administrator transferred my query through 2 authentication levels, each requiring additional verification. Finally, I was connected with Dr. Chen, the medical records compliance officer who seemed unusually guarded when she saw my name. "Parameters all within normal range," she said after reviewing the file, her voice carrying that clinical detachment we use when something isn't right. "Healthy male infant delivered at 3:42 a.m. No documented complications." "But his electronic medical record identifier has a discrepancy with mine," I said, my diagnostic instincts flaring. "Single-digit variance in the alphanumeric sequence. System artifacts can occur during high-volume processing," she replied with the rapid efficiency of someone reciting protocol rather than investigating. "We've implemented enhanced verification algorithms since then." Before I could pursue my inquiry further, she abruptly redirected me. "You should submit a formal request to the records department for certified documentation." Connection terminated. I sat there for a long time with my tablet still displaying the incomplete medical record. It was like the hospital's system was designed to obfuscate, as if proper investigation was being deliberately impeded. That same day, I began forensic analysis of Ethan's digital footprint, his credentials, professional certifications, conference presentations, anything I could access with my medical database privileges. I told myself I was just being thorough, but deep down, I was searching for data inconsistencies that would either invalidate my suspicions or confirm them with the evidence my scientific mind demanded. But there were gaps. No digital presence before 2012, no academic publications, just a LinkedIn profile and his security certifications, which I noticed didn't include verification numbers I could cross-reference. I'd never analyzed these details before with my clinical scrutiny. Or maybe I never applied the same diagnostic rigor to my personal life that I did to my patients. When I questioned him later, he laughed with practiced ease that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Server breach wiped all that data when I was consulting overseas, remember? I briefed you on that security incident. Did he tell me at the time?" My memory showed no record of this disclosure, and I pride myself on my attention to patient histories. Every data anomaly suddenly felt like a clinical symptom, and once you start documenting a differential diagnosis, professional ethics demand you continue your investigation. Still, I agreed to the DNA test, not because I questioned Noah's genetics, but because I needed scientific evidence, not of Noah's biological markers, but of Ethan's. I didn't verbalize this hypothesis, of course, just as I wouldn't share an uncertain diagnosis with a patient. I just nodded and said, "Okay." And the moment I consented, Ethan exhaled, displaying physiological signs of relief that my trained eye couldn't miss. That was the moment my diagnostic instincts crystallized with certainty. He wasn't afraid of what the genetic analysis might reveal about our son. He was afraid I'd terminate the investigation before it revealed something about him. The DNA test was scheduled for Thursday. Ethan handled everything, researched the facility, verified their credentials, even drove us there while explaining their sequencing methods like it was some routine cybersecurity audit. He was calm, too calm, with the practiced composure of someone who knows exactly what the outcome will be. Meanwhile, I felt like my chest was constricted with surgical wire, tightening every time I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. Noah was in his car seat in the back, blinking up at the ceiling, kicking his tiny socks off again with textbook-perfect motor reflexes. He was the only one in the car whose vital signs appeared normal. I envied his physiological peace. We submitted the samples, mine, Ethan's, Noah's, and were informed we'd receive results in 5 business days. Ethan attempted humor on the way out, something like, "Bet his genetic sequence is 80% perfect, 20% troubleshooter." But I barely processed his words. My medical mind was already calculating probabilities and preparing for multiple diagnostic scenarios. 5 days. 5 days to exist in this clinical uncertainty, knowing my husband questioned our son's paternity, and recognizing that my professional assessment of Ethan's identity was fundamentally flawed. That night I couldn't sleep, my circadian rhythm completely disrupted by stress hormones. I lay in bed, pretending to review medical journals on my tablet while Ethan exhibited normal sleep patterns beside me, but my thoughts maintained hyperactive neural pathways. His server breach explanation about missing digital history kept triggering my diagnostic suspicion. It presented like a carefully constructed case history rather than lived experience. Why couldn't I recall any prior documentation of this significant event in our relationship? The next morning, I left Noah with Vanessa and returned to my hospital, not as a patient but as Dr. Olivia Miller, OBGYN. I told the front desk I needed to review some charts for a research project, technically true, even if the research was deeply personal. My medical credentials granted immediate access to the maternity ward. The moment I saw Fiona, the experienced midwife who had exchanged that concerned glance during delivery, I felt a surge of professional curiosity mixed with maternal dread. She recognized me immediately. "Hello, Dr. Miller," she said, her clinical demeanor softening. "How's your little boy doing?" "Developing on schedule," I said, automatically using medical terminology. "But I need to consult with you on something concerning." I showed her the electronic record discrepancy, the mismatched identifier, the anomalous follow-up procedure. I expected her to offer standard reassurance, but instead, her professional composure faltered noticeably. "I shouldn't disclose this," she said, checking that we weren't being monitored. But that night we did flag a potential database integrity issue, just momentarily. The system displayed duplicate patient records under your medical number. It was eventually resolved. Administration classified it as a routine system error and instructed staff to disregard. I felt my blood pressure drop precipitously. Was Noah ever removed from the monitored environment without my presence? I asked, my clinical voice betraying me. Fiona hesitated, the way we do before delivering concerning news. "For standard neonatal assessment, yes, but only for the standard protocol duration." "Quantify a standard protocol duration," I pressed. She averted her eyes, breaking our professional eye contact. I thanked her, my autonomic nervous system in overdrive, and exited the hospital in a state of cognitive dissonance. My hands exhibited fine tremors as I gripped the steering wheel. My oral mucosa was noticeably dry. The phrase, "duplicate patient records," reverberated through my neural pathways like a medical emergency alert. I couldn't disclose these findings to Ethan. Not without further confirmation. I needed corroborating evidence. So I initiated a comprehensive investigation, digital footprints, security conference proceedings, every database I had professional access to regarding Ethan's history. I even utilized Vanessa's legal database subscriptions, something my ethical boundaries would normally prevent. I had transformed from physician to forensic investigator in my own marriage. But the more I analyzed, the more inconsistencies appeared: no documentation of his claimed security certifications, no digital presence prior to 2012. And most disturbingly, no professional references who could verify his work before he met me at that medical data security conference. Not a single colleague from his alleged previous contracts. It was as if Ethan Cameron had spontaneously materialized at age 29 with a fully formed security consultant identity. I stared at a suspiciously generic profile from a cybersecurity conference website and felt my digestive system contract with stress. I had consented to genetic testing to establish Noah's paternity, but now my diagnostic concerns had evolved. What terrified me more wasn't whether Noah shared Ethan's DNA, but the growing clinical evidence that Ethan's entire identity might be a fabricated medical history. The call came early on a Wednesday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, monitoring Noah's feeding patterns, still in my scrubs, when my phone rang. The screen displayed, "restricted number." I almost didn't answer. My heart raced, but my clinical training took over. "Dr. Miller?" a measured voice said. "This is Dr. Hawkins from Molecular Diagnostics. We need you and your husband to come in today to discuss the genomic sequencing results in person." "In person?" I asked, my throat instantly dry. "Yes. The findings require immediate attention." My stomach dropped. I couldn't even speak. I just acknowledged as if receiving lab results. Ethan didn't ask questions when I told him. He just said, "Data confirmed," and grabbed his keys. The drive to the laboratory was silent. Noah was asleep in his car seat, unaware of the scientific storm surrounding him. I stared out the window, pulse racing, trying to regulate my breathing. At the lab, a technician led us to a consultation room. It was cold, sterile, precisely temperature-controlled for sensitive equipment. A digital monitor on the wall displayed biomarkers, each update intensifying my anxiety. Then Dr. Hawkins entered. He was mid-50s, graying at the temples, with the authority of a forensic specialist. He sat across from us, opened a secure file, and paused long enough that my chest tightened. "I'm going to present my findings directly," he stated. The genetic analysis produced highly anomalous results. I held Noah closer, suddenly aware of his warmth, tangible proof of his existence. Dr. Hawkins looked at me first. "Dr. Miller, biologically, this child shows no genetic relationship to Ethan Cameron." I didn't blink. My diagnostic prediction was correct. But then he turned to Ethan. His gaze lingered with clinical precision. Something shifted in his expression, professional concern, perhaps even controlled alarm. "And Mr. Cameron," he continued, voice lower, "your DNA not only excludes paternity, but critically, your genetic profile doesn't match any records associated with your provided identification." Ethan went completely still. I looked at him, expecting some physiological response, but his face showed nothing. Dr. Hawkins closed the file. "We conducted verification through federal databases. Your name, date of birth, even your biometric data, all triggered a security protocol." My blood pressure dropped dangerously. "What are you saying?" I asked, barely audible. Dr. Hawkins didn't answer. He activated his communication system and said one sentence I'll never forget: "Security, immediate presence required in consultation room 4. Time stopped. I turned toward Ethan, and for the first time, I saw a momentary micro-expression, fear. But it vanished instantly. "What's happening?" I whispered. Ethan just stood. "This is scientifically unsound," he stated flatly. "You're classifying me as what, a digital identity thief?" But Dr. Hawkins remained composed. "We're not theorizing. Your DNA matches Cameron Wright, indicted for cybercrime in 2014. The real Ethan Cameron died in an accident the following year." I couldn't breathe. The room destabilized. The security expert I married, the father of my child, was a complete fabrication. As federal agents entered, Ethan, no, Cameron, looked at me, not with guilt but with something like regret, as if perhaps momentarily he'd wanted to be the person he'd invented. They removed him efficiently, from my life, from Noah's future, from our elaborate fiction. I didn't cry immediately, not during his restraint, not as he was escorted out, not even when Dr. Hawkins transferred the genetic report to my medical credentials. I sat there, processing, holding Noah against my chest, his head under my chin, the only biological certainty in my suddenly recalibrated reality. The days after felt like wading through medical research data without parameters. Everything slowed down, clinical judgment suspended. Medical journals contacted me when the case appeared in professional literature: healthcare security breach perpetrated through physician relationship. They termed it a medical data theft case with identity fraud elements. I rejected their clinical framing. This wasn't research. This was my life. Investigation revealed Ethan Cameron had created multiple digital identities, evading prosecution and accessing healthcare networks nationwide. He wasn't physically violent, but the psychological trauma cut deeper than any pathology I'd diagnosed. What kind of person constructs a false identity to infiltrate medical systems? And more disturbing, what kind of person fathers a child within that deception? For weeks, I analyzed every interaction diagnostically, every conversation, his gesture, and seeking symptoms I should have detected. But the truth is, individuals with antisocial tendencies excel at mirroring exactly what their targets need. What shocked me most, Noah was genetically mine. I'd feared a potential infant exchange or identification error. But the investigation confirmed what Fiona had tried to tell me. There had been a system anomaly, but it was corrected before discharge. Noah remained under proper supervision throughout. He was mine from his first breath. Yet Cameron weaponized that technical glitch. He amplified uncertainty, directed my suspicion elsewhere to protect his cover. Methodical. Malicious. Calculated. It took weeks to say his real name, longer to stop calling him Ethan in my thoughts. Now it's just Noah and me. We stayed with Vanessa temporarily, my sister, who never said, "I warned you." She supported me when I finally broke down, and she treats Noah like he's everything. Because to me, he is. I filed for legal nullification. There were no complications, you can't remain married to a fictional person. Sometimes I still receive mail for Ethan Cameron. I discard it without opening. And sometimes during night shifts, I think about the man I thought I knew, who helped with night feedings, painted the nursery, supported my medical career. Was any of it genuine, or all strategic deception? I lack conclusive data. Perhaps I always will. But this I know, sometimes truth doesn't just hurt. It completely destabilizes your reality. It forces complete reconstruction, requires rediscovering your identity independent of who you thought was your partner. Through that painful recalibration comes resilience. You rediscover yourself. And I found Noah. That's more than sufficient. I now present at medical cybersecurity conferences. If you've experienced uncertainty about professional relationships or clinical instincts, know others share this experience. Sometimes difficult diagnoses lead to the most effective treatments. If this case resonated, provided perspective, or reinforced trusting your instincts, please share with colleagues who might benefit, and follow my research for more evidence-based security protocols. Your engagement advances medical security more than you know. Until next time, maintain both clinical vigilance and humanity.